Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Hale. I'm the CEO of Victory, which owns GI Jobs. I would like to welcome you to the December 2021 version of the GI Jobs Virtual Career Expo. Today's is extra special because today all of the companies are on our military-friendly employer list. So I wish you great success networking with all the employers who have come here today to help you get hired into a great civilian job. You have arrived at the kickoff keynote address, and you've made a good choice by being here because all we do here at GI Jobs is bring you A-listers. And this month is no different. Why do we bring you A-listers? Because it's a big part of being successful in the private sector is really surrounding yourself with and learning from and networking with and mentoring, being mentored by those who have been very, very successful. So be inspired today. I'm pleased to be joined today by A-lister, Admiral Hal Pittman. Hal is the director of the Defense Media Activity, where he runs DoD's global agency providing information, news, and entertainment content to 3 million US service members, government civilians, and their families stationed around the world. Hal leads a team of 1,500 combined military and civilians at 30 plus US bases. Those of us who are still in the military, or if you've recently separated, you probably remember Armed Forces Network, American Forces Network, AFN, as well as Stars and Stripes. That's Hal and his group. So big, big organization. Prior to returning to government this past January, Hal worked for 7 years as a director with Arizona Public Service, which is Arizona's largest publicly traded energy company. While there, Hal founded Veterans in Energy, which is a nonprofit that seeks ways to advance the career opportunities of military veterans in the energy industry. So he certainly has been highly involved in this whole military transition space, and we'll have a lot of great information to share with us. Before APS, Hal was president and CEO of Special Olympics Iowa, and prior to that, he served an illustrious 30 years in the US Navy, retiring as a one-star admiral in 2012. He's got an undergraduate degree from Appalachian State, a master's degree in journalism from American University, and has also attended executive education programs at a couple of schools called MIT, Dartmouth, and UVA. So very, very well educated and someone who's committed to lifelong learning, which he'll talk about. Personally, I met Hal in the late 90s when I was forming what would become GI Jobs. And at the time, Hal was running media and all hands magazine for the US Navy. I think he was an 04 lieutenant commander at the time. He was a phenomenal mentor for myself and my co-founder, Rich McCormick, in those early days. He has a lovely wife, Rebecca, who is a highly successful public affairs executive. And his son, Evan, is a world-class diver, martial artist, and power lifter. Just an accomplished human being, an accomplished family, first-rate American. I count him as a cherished friend. Love you, Hal. So proud that you're here with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Admiral Hal Pittman.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be and whenever you might be viewing this GI Jobs Virtual Career Expo. Chris, thanks a million for that intro, man. And as Chris mentioned, I've known him since before GI Jobs was founded. So we go back a minute, and I continue to be impressed by the important work that you do on behalf of veterans. So thank you for that. First off, because I'm again serving in government as a member of the Senior Executive Service, I have to provide a disclaimer up front. My comments today reflect my own experiences and are in no way an endorsement of any commercial enterprise. With that out of the way, I'll tell you that I take the challenges veterans face very seriously. I made the transition to the civilian sector after nearly 30 years in the Navy, and I made that transition as a Navy one-star, and it was difficult at my level then. So I understand the challenges that those in uniform face every day as they work to make a smooth transition to the corporate sector or whatever. To be honest, I'll tell you, it's a surprise that I'm even in front of you all today having this conversation. There was never a guarantee that I was going to be a military officer, and in fact, things could have gone the other way very easily. I was turned down the first time I applied for OCS. I became interested in the Navy while I was a senior at Appalachian State in beautiful Boone, North Carolina. And I approached the recruiters and I submitted an application for OCS at that time. A few weeks later, while I was awaiting the results of that process, I happened to be in the App Student Union. I saw a young Navy officer in his uniform, recently commissioned ensign who was stashed in Western North Carolina on hometown recruiting duty, there in his whites, awaiting formal schooling. He had a stack of recruiting brochures with him. And I went up and I told him I had applied to be a Navy officer. So the ensign asked me a couple of questions, particularly about my studies and whether I had an engineering or quantitative background. For reference, this was the early 1980s. The economy wasn't good and the Navy was focused on recruiting engineers. After a 5-minute conversation, he essentially dismissed me, told me I needed to stay in school to complete an additional degree in engineering if I wanted to be a competitive candidate to be a Navy officer. And talk about a buzzkill. I walked away from that engagement just crushed. And I want to remind you here that people face these kinds of life-changing discussions and decision points every day. Oftentimes, the critical words of a supervisor, coach, teacher, mentor, or even parent can lead people to give up on their dreams before they even try. This was one of those crossroad type moments in my life. As I said, I was upset after that conversation, but then I got mad. So who was this guy to judge whether I could make it as a Navy officer? He didn't know me. He didn't know my motivational level or how hard I was willing to work to be successful. And it's there that I want to talk about a personal character trait that has served me well through the years, and one that all of you here today have within yourselves by virtue of having gone through military training and serving in uniform, and that's persistence. Persistence is the ability to carry on no matter how tough it gets. It's the grit that was idealized in Wharton professor Angela Duckworth's best-selling book, The Resilience to Stay on Task no matter what. It's about tackling every issue or effort with the determination of firmness of purpose that tells everyone you will not be beaten. So in my case, I wanted to be a Navy officer. No one was going to discourage me. After being knocked down metaphorically, I got back up, dusted myself off, and I kept moving towards my goal. When my OCS application package was disapproved, I enlisted. Now you're probably asking yourself, why would he enlist when he was completing a college degree and wanted to be an officer? The truth was, I believed in myself and that I could work my way into an officer's commission. And I did just that. I persisted. 26 months after joining the Navy as an enlisted seaman and then petty officer, I earned my commission through Navy OCS, graduating in the bottom 50% of my class. After completing Navy Supply Corps school, I went to my first ship, USS Davidson, out of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. And that's where I decided I wanted to redesignate as a public affairs officer. The first time I applied to be a PAO, I was turned down, but I persisted. I performed as well as I could in my current role as the ship's assistant supply officer, while I also served as a collateral duty PAO, and I tried to learn the PAO business. I studied the application process as well. I reapplied, and then the next time I was selected. During my 20 years as a Navy PAO, I earned a reputation for taking the tough jobs and the deployments that others didn't want to take. And I did that because I wanted to prove and differentiate myself. And I'll tell you, so whether it's in the military or in the business world, that's one of the things that sets you apart and gets you noticed and promoted, taking the demanding jobs that others refuse. I'll put that in the category of persistence, constantly driving to get ahead and getting up every time you get knocked down. I tell you this story for a couple of reasons. First, if you have a dream or a vision for the future, never, ever give up on it. Never let naysayers get to you. You know, you have the ability to say, I will. You and only you are in control of your dreams. And this willingness to drive ahead is an element that will serve you well in transitioning from military service and finding that next great opportunity. So, as Chris mentioned, my youngest son's a world champion athlete and a world record holder. And growing up in our house, my guidance to him was pretty simple. We don't ever use the word can't. There is no such thing as can't. The word can't implies that something or someone has power to limit your actions. There is no can't. There is only I will or I won't. The decision to go forward in any endeavor is all on you. And I truly believe that. It's about how hard you are willing to work toward your own success. Dealing with transition to the civilian sector can be daunting for anyone, and you have to put in the work, studying the industries you're interested in, studying the cultures of the companies or organizations you want to work for, assessing your own skills, and preparing yourself for work beyond the uniform. Generally speaking, the civilian workplace is extremely broad and nuanced, and it's going to take study on your part to find the right connections and opportunities. You may land in the wrong place and need to regroup and keep looking, but I'm satisfied that if you remain persistent, you will achieve success. I'm going to touch on a couple of other things today that can help you in both your search for the next great opportunity and through the years in driving for successful outcomes in the workplace. But first, I just want to put a fine point on my comments about persistence. During my Navy career, I was never the smartest guy in the room, but I studied my environment. I've built networks everywhere I went, and I approached every effort with persistence and determination. If you remember, I said earlier that it took me 2 applications to get to officer candidate school, and then I graduated in the bottom half of my class of more than 350 officer candidates. What I didn't mention was that I was the first from my OCS class to make flag. Evidence that achievement is not just driven by intellect, but also grounded in persistence and grit, the willingness to drive harder and longer than others to achieve your goals. Besides persistent, there's a couple of other elements I'd like to touch on while discussing how to manage your transition from the uniform to whatever comes next. 1, define your interests. When I was retiring, and Chris and I had a chance to talk about this a little bit just before we began this recording today, but when I was retiring, I had an interest in working in the sports industry. I took board of director positions with 2 nonprofit sports organizations, which means there was no pay. And these opportunities gave me insight in regarding how nonprofits worked, and it added to my knowledge of the sports industry and the study that I was already doing. I applied for jobs where I didn't even get an interview before I finally landed at Special Olympics in Des Moines, Iowa. So here's another data point for your transition, okay? You need to understand whether you're willing to accept a job anywhere in the US or overseas, or if you're limiting your search to a specific geographic area for family or other reasons. In my case, while I didn't have any ties to Iowa, that was where the job was. And as a military family, we felt comfortable heading to a new adventure. Also, I advise military transitioners to research any industry you're considering. Specifically, learn how the business or nonprofit makes money. I'm going to double tap that one. Learn how the business or nonprofit makes money. Unless you continue working for the government, the organization that hires you has to make money to survive and pay its bills. So you'll need to have an understanding of how business works. 2, assess yourself and prepare for the next chapter. I also encourage you to take a thorough self-assessment of your own tools and skill sets. You need to use your GI Bill benefits to continue your education. That's if you need to. In particular, I'd encourage you to consider business schools. Several top business schools offer relatively low-cost executive education programs, which are short courses, a couple of weeks or possibly a month, specifically tailored, some of them for military transitioners that give you a good primer on the world of business. Several of the Ivies also offer executive education programs that are covered by your GI Bill benefits. So do your homework on this issue. I wrote an article for GI Jobs a couple of years back where I talked about using GI Bill benefits and combined with yellow ribbon benefits, where you can actually access some pretty costly and substantial executive ed programs that would be a great credential and also present some fantastic learning. So do your research on that. Now, with regards to this idea of education, I'm a huge believer in lifelong learning. And here I want to foot stomp this idea of continuous personal growth. It's a big deal. Why, you ask? Okay, glad you asked. If you think about Moore's law is the theory which says that the power of computing chips doubles every 12 to 18 months or so. Okay, that means information technology is just going to exponentially explode over the course of our lives. We must do everything we can to continue to upskill ourselves to keep pace with the world around us. Even at my age, I'm currently doing an executive MBA and a Master of Science in Technology Management because I believe I need the business acumen to keep pace with the world around me. I'm essentially doing another master's degree to prepare for my next 20 years of work. Part of assessing yourself is understanding your own story and breaking that down into stories you can share when interviewing. What are your defining moments? What was the challenge you faced? How did you overcome it? And what was the outcome? I characterize the defining moment as when you face extreme challenges where you ultimately succeed, and in succeeding, you're stretched well beyond your comfort zone, learning something about your own capabilities in the process. Employers want to hear these stories because these stories tell them about you, how you think, and what you're capable of. 3, use your network all the time. We all have a network, all of us. I'm a big believer in using everyone in your network to help you make the successful transition out of uniform. Your network is everyone you have a relationship with, who you can reach out to. It may include former coaches and teachers, past commanders, past colleagues, and childhood friends. I maintain communications with a number of my former bosses and others who worked with me, and I check in with them periodically. It isn't because I want anything. Usually it's just to say hello. Your network may include those you are connected with on LinkedIn or other social media. I have folks from my past who reach out to me all the time on LinkedIn for information, to reconnect, to discuss a certain issue, career field, or job, or whatever. You may find that opportunities come from unusual sources. Okay. Some folks who you think would be really, really helpful may not be helpful at all. While amazing leads can come from sources that you'd never expect. So never discount anyone in that network. I maintain what I call my own personal board of directors, colleagues I can rely on to give me unvarnished advice on career and professional issues. These include former shipmates from my military career, professionals that I met in the nonprofit and the business world, and even former schoolmates that might have insight on issues I'm focused on. Here's a couple of quick examples. A former junior high classmate of mine served as the CEO of a tech company and also sits on boards for tech startups. When I had questions about due diligence and looking at an opportunity in the tech world, I went to him to better understand how to size up that opportunity. Here's another one. When I was in 06, I was a Navy captain. Through my contacts, I interviewed for and received an amazing job offer to run a venture-funded company. But taking that job would have required me to retire prematurely. It was a huge decision point. Remember, I spoke about decision points earlier. Everything I had done up to that point was focused on advancing my Navy career. And I was really wrestling with this issue. My wife, who is my biggest advisor, her cousin had been the CEO of 2 business units at General Electric, and she asked me to call him for advice on the job offer. His offer, or his advice rather, to me was pretty simple. 1, if you're going to opine about what might have been with regards to your military career, coulda, shoulda, woulda, then you aren't ready to retire. 2, if you've received a job offer like this, then you're at this level in terms of competence, and there will be more opportunities like this for you in the future. I asked other mentors and advisors about this issue as well, but his advice was the most resonant for me. So I turned down the corporate offer and the money. I stayed in uniform and ultimately was promoted. Lastly, I want you to remember that money isn't everything, as that last story illustrates. There's something to be said about enjoying the work you do. That means liking the work, the people you work with, and the organization that you work for. Culture matters in a huge way. And I'm going to double tap this one too, because it can't be overstated. Culture is huge. I encourage you to do everything within your power to research the culture of the organization you're considering a job with. In fact, culture may be the single most important issue in determining whether you stay in a particular role once you're in the civilian sector. I'll characterize it like this. Whether you've served 4 years or 40, you've been indoctrinated in an organization, the United States military, which has certain left and right boundaries of cultural behavior. Okay? Companies, nonprofit organizations, and governmental agencies may have much broader standards of behavior and far different cultural values than those that you are familiar with. It's different, and sometimes veterans may find they've landed in an organization that looked good from the outside, but doesn't live up to their own personal values and expectations. That's when that veteran needs to make a change. And this is where I'll make a pitch for organizations that end up on lists like Best Employers for Veterans. There's something to be said about joining an organization which has a track record of successfully employing veterans. I'll also remind you that there are certain industries that are veteran friendly, like the energy industry, which I was employed in before returning to government. And you can find a number of veterans in these kinds of jobs and work environments. So the last thing I'm going to touch on just briefly is working for the federal government, and I'll address it from my own perspective. Early this year, after leading a sports nonprofit, founding 2 veteran workforce development nonprofits, and working as an executive in an S&P 500 publicly traded company, I returned to the Department of Defense as an SES, leading a defense activity. I didn't do it because I needed a job. I had a great job that paid me well, and I took a major pay cut to return to government. So why did I do it? I missed the mission, and I missed serving, being part of our national security team dealing with global issues. But most of all, I missed the people. I missed leading soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and Guardians, and developing and delivering the DoD's message around the world. For each of you, the opportunity to continue serving in the federal government is an option. And there are extra points for veterans preference hiring in the GS system. But taking that road is a decision that you'll have to make as you think about the future. So thank you all for your time today. And I think Chris and I are going to do a couple of Q&A before we get into the meat of today's expo. Chris?
Thanks, Hal. That's really great words, super inspiring, and a great message. Appreciate it. You know, when you talk about, you know, the comments you had on grit, you know, you think about, you know, failure and response to failure. You mentioned telling your son Evan that we don't use the word can't in this family. You know, failure is just, it's not failure, right? Failure is going to happen. It's just another way to learn. It's how you respond to that failure. You know, for the audience that's here today of transitioning service members and service members who have been out for a few years who are seeking a new civilian job, you know, one of the things that we all experienced when we left the military was, am I going to be successful in the private sector? You know, do my skills translate? And it's very daunting. For some reason, when we move to different jobs in the military, it becomes sort of, you know, just something we do, right? And it's sort of hardwired into that culture. But when we go off into this new civilian world, man, it's really scary. I think a lot of it has to do with, and you touched upon culture, right? In the military, the culture is you've got a uniform on, you know, your resume is on your chest, right? With your rank and all the ribbons you've had. You know, everything's sort of well documented and you're very confident in your abilities. When you go into the private sector, it's not that way. And there's just a lot of fear and a lot of angst about how am I going to be successful and how do my skills translate? Any advice you'd give, you know, the audience today specific to that you can either draw from your own experiences or from others that you've known that's made that transition?
Yeah, first of all, Chris, I would just tell you, look, transition's hard. It's hard. It doesn't matter if you're transitioning, you know, as an E3, E4, or as a '07. It's hard because you got to move outside your comfort zone. But you know what? All of you, every one of you have amazing skill sets that the military has trained you in. You've been trained in the best leadership laboratory in the world, the US military, right? That's where, all the top companies, over the years have drawn their leadership lessons from in team building and creating chain of command and creating alignment within the organization and sort of looking at the strategic ways ahead, strategic planning. I mean, the stuff that goes on in the corporate sector today was pioneered in the military 50 years ago or more. And so the skill sets that you bring to the table are second to none. If you need to upskill your education, do it. But the big thing is finding the right fit. And I talked about culture, and it's so, so, so amazingly important, Chris. And I think guys forget about it because they get caught up in, I've had 3 interviews at this particular job, and maybe it's the right one. They sent out 50 resumes, and so these are the guys that responded. Well, I mean, do your homework about the company and find out what it's like to be part of that organization. The worst feeling in the world is to be hired and then to go to work and it sucks. You don't want that. You don't want to be in a culture where you feel you're out of place, and so do your homework, figure out what the culture is like. That's why I put in a plug for the military friendly list, the military friendly company lists. It's not nothing. It's a big deal. And these are companies that have dedicated their efforts, and they may be in industries that specifically lend themselves to sort of the military mindset. For example, aerospace, right? I mean, we're talking about safety parameters and dynamics and creating a product where if we fail, people die, and those are important things. Same thing with energy. I mean, we have to, like, for example, I was in the largest energy company in the state of Arizona, Arizona Public Service. We have to serve all of our customers. I mean, if it's extremely hot, they need air conditioning. If they're in the mountains and it's cold and there's a snowstorm, we need to make sure their power is on and they're not put in extremis because of having lost power. We're serving. It's kind of a military mindset. As a matter of fact, the company that I worked for, 6,500 employees, almost 20% of those are veterans. So that gives you an idea of kind of how a company can sort of lend itself to processes and ways of doing business that are familiar to veterans and they take comfort in. And there's an affinity within the organization. So do your homework on those companies that are out there and make sure you understand the culture. But also never doubt yourself. Never doubt yourself. Never let others fill you with doubt. Only you know what you're capable of. You've got world-class experiences that you're bringing with you from your military service. You've got intangibles and leadership experiences that most people your age don't have. So take advantage of those. And don't be afraid. Don't be bashful in the workplace. Step up, man, because all of us have been trained to lead from an early age. It's what we do in the U.S. military, in the corporate sector, and the nonprofit sector. They need people with these skill sets.
How the culture stuff is so important. When we're in the military, we're part of something that's far bigger than any of us individually, right? And I think that's just something that really drives us. We're solving, we're implementing U.S. foreign policy abroad. We're tip of the spear, right, on some really, really important national defense kinds of things. There's just a real sense of mission and purpose that goes along with that. And when you get out, man, it is a letdown. I'll be honest. I personally felt that. Here I am doing anti-submarine warfare missions on a P3. with a crew of 11 in the North Atlantic, and it was just phenomenal experiences and brotherhood, and then all of a sudden I'm out and I'm working for a great company, Procter and Gamble, but I was selling coffee and Iams dog food to national food distributors. It just was not the
Yeah.
same thing, right?
Right.
And just that part of being something, and for several years, I look back on that and I said, man, I made a mistake. I should have stayed in the military. But at some point, you just have to realize that it's impossible to really match that level, that you had in the service, or the esprit de corps that you had with your teammates. Because civilians go home in the evenings, and they go home on the weekends, right? And it's not this sort of 24/7 fraternity that you got in the military. Talk about some of that, how to deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Chris, you're so right. And you're never going to match the camaraderie that you have in the uniform in any organization on the outside. It's just not going to happen. So you need to understand that up front. It's extremely unlikely. Let's say I'm not going to say never, but let's just say extremely unlikely. Because you're shoulder to shoulder with the person next to you, in pursuit of a huge mission on behalf of our country and our culture. I mean, you build relationships there that are not forgotten. And, like you said, Chris, it's not the same when you're selling widgets. And so what I did, and I found that was true even in a very veteran friendly organization. So I found myself creating other nonprofit opportunities that could help other veterans with finding job opportunities. So you mentioned that, I founded Veterans in Energy, which is a national nonprofit, and, working in conjunction with the Edison Electric Institute, the Nuclear Energy Institute, and others. And we brought a group of veterans together, created a board, and we, created the opportunity for professional development, training and education for veterans who are working in the energy business. Same thing in the state of Arizona. I came together with some representatives from some other great companies that had big headquarters in Arizona, including USAA and some others. And we, created the Arizona Corporate Council on Veteran Careers, which was designed to promote veteran hiring and, smooth veteran transition in the state of Arizona, which is has a high percentage of veterans among its workforce. And so, and I did these things to help, but also because, I knew I'd be working with other veterans and it would help create that sort of affinity and that, that camaraderie that was missing from the workplace. You're never going to fully replicate it, but, I would encourage folks to be involved in veterans groups and, veterans causes, because that's where you will interact with other folks that have worn the uniform, that are probably, doing, 9-to-5 jobs like you are now in the workplace. But, you can look at something that's like mission focused as a nonprofit, to find that, higher calling and that sort of, morale building opportunity. So
Yeah, I know. Good stuff. And I know, you at APS, like a lot of big companies, they've got veteran employee resource groups.
that's right.
And that's a great way to stay connected. Were you involved?
Oh yeah,
Years at
yeah,
APS?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was a senior advisor for our group, and we had about 600 people, and it was a matrixed opportunity. But I was invariably coming up with activities and events that our company's employee networking group or employee resource group could be involved with, and so we were forever doing different types of engagements, in the community, whether it be participating in a stand down, which includes like home companies and nonprofits coming together to support homeless vets around, like, say, the holidays or something like that, provide food, shelter, essential services, and those sorts of things. Anything from that to being part of the honoring veterans games at Arizona State University, walking out on the field at the start of the game and recognizing companies who were doing great things in the veteran hiring and veteran employment space. All of those kinds of activities were attended by the folks on our veteran, resource group organization. And, we would do events in the local community where we were trying to assist. We would do events over, say, Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays and whatnot. And it was a great group of folks, really was. And, they were people that I didn't necessarily work with all of them every day and day to day, but, we were able to come together and do some good in the context of, an organization that was created, by the company. And likewise, people were able to network within that organization with other veterans when there was a potential opportunity where, they could move up within the organization. So I wholeheartedly think that the veteran resource groups, employee resource groups are a great tool.
Yeah, and I think it's something that a lot of the folks here today probably don't understand, but those, the bigger companies have those groups, and yeah, great way to stay in touch with fellow employees who are working at that company, who share that same tribal background as you do. So
yeah,
really good stuff. Hal, we're going to wrap up here. Can't thank you enough. The message was clear. Follow the money, right? Follow the money where the company or the nonprofit that you're joining, what is that source of revenue? Use your network to the hilt, and basically everybody that you know, and find your culture. Really, really strong message, inspiring words. Can't thank you enough for joining us here today and imparting some really great message, a great message to all the folks who are joining today's Virtual Career Expo. To all of those who are at the Virtual Career Expo today, I encourage you to get out, talk to these military-friendly employers, have great conversations, and good luck in your journey to get hired. Thank you, everybody.